The sun beat down on Redemption Creek like it had a personal grudge against the place. For 8 months straight, not a single drop of rain had fallen. The grass turned brown, then gray, then just disappeared into dust. The cattle were getting thinner by the day, and so was everyone's hope. Tommy Mercer stood on his porch watching the horizon like rain clouds might suddenly appear if he stared hard enough. They never did. His boots were worn through at the heels. His shirt had more patches than original fabric, and his hat had seen better decades. But none of that mattered compared to what was happening inside his small ranch house. His daughter, little Beth, was sick. Not the kind of sick where you rest for a few days and bounce back. The kind where doctors shake their heads and use words like fragile and critical and experimental treatment. She'd been born weak, the doc said. Her lungs didn't work right. Her heart struggled with things that other kids' hearts did without thinking. Tommy's wife had died bringing Beth into the world, and that little girl was all he had left. Every time he looked at her pale face and heard that rattling cough, his chest tightened up so bad he could barely breathe himself. The medical bills were crushing him. Doc Harrison had been patient, more patient than any creditor had a right to be, but even patience has a price tag. The medicine Beth needed came from back east, expensive stuff that cost more than Tommy made in 3 months of good work. And these weren't good months. These were disaster months. He'd already sold his best breeding bull. Gone. Sold his wife's jewelry, the only things he had to remember her by. Gone. Borrowed money from his neighbors until they stopped answering their doors when they saw him coming. He'd taken every odd job in town, fixed fences, mucked stables, hauled lumber, anything that paid even a few coins. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. The bank had sent another notice. They wanted the ranch. His grandfather had built this place with his bare hands, and now some banker in a clean suit was going to take it because Tommy couldn't make the payments. Without the ranch, he'd have nothing. No income, no home, nowhere to care for Beth. That morning, Beth had coughed so hard she couldn't catch her breath for almost a minute. Tommy had held her tiny body, feeling every rib through her nightgown, and watched her lips turn blue. When she finally gasped in air, she looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes and said, "I'm okay, Papa, don't worry. Don't worry." Like telling the sun not to shine or the wind not to blow. Doc Harrison had pulled him aside after checking on Beth that afternoon. The man looked tired, older than his years. "Tommy, I'm going to be straight with you. Without the new treatment, without proper medicine and better food, that girl won't see Christmas. Maybe not even Halloween." The words hit like bullets. It was September. How much? Tommy had asked, though he already knew the answer would destroy him. More than you've got. More than this whole town's got, probably. We're talking about treatments from specialists, medicine that has to be ordered special, maybe even surgery back in San Francisco. Could be looking at thousands of dollars. Thousands. Tommy made about $300 in a good year. This wasn't a good year. That evening, Tommy sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee he couldn't afford and a ledger that made him want to cry. He'd written down every asset he had, every possible way to make money. He'd subtracted every debt, every expense, every payment he owed. The numbers didn't lie. He was ruined. He could hear Beth sleeping in the next room, that awful wheeze with every breath. The sound haunted his dreams. Sometimes he'd wake up in a panic, rushing to her room just to make sure she was still breathing. His mind went to dark places. Desperate places. He thought about robbing the bank. He thought about stealing cattle and selling them in the next county. He thought about things that would shame his grandfather's memory and destroy what little honor he had left. But he kept coming back to Beth's face. That little girl trusted him completely. She believed her papa could fix anything, solve any problem, chase away any monster. What kind of man would he be if he gave up? What kind of father? The next morning, Tommy walked into town to buy medicine he couldn't pay for. His credit was exhausted, his reputation in tatters, and his pride was dust. But his daughter needed that medicine, and he'd beg if he had to. The general store was busy, folks buying supplies and gossiping like they always did. Tommy waited in line, clutching the prescription paper like a lifeline, trying to ignore the whispers and pointing. Everyone knew the Mercer Ranch was failing. Everyone knew about poor little Beth. When his turn came, the shopkeeper looked at the prescription and then at Tommy, with something between pity and annoyance. "Tommy, you know I can't keep giving you credit. You're into me for nearly $50 already. Please, Mr. Chen, it's for Beth, just this one time. That's what you said last month. And the month before, Tommy felt the room spinning. The lack of sleep, the constant worry, the poor food because he gave Beth the better portions. It all crashed down on him at once. His vision went black at the edges. His knees buckled and the floor came up to meet him hard. He woke up on a bench outside, Doc Harrison checking his pulse. A small crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of concern and that peculiar satisfaction people get from watching others' misfortunes. "You collapsed," the doc said quietly. "When's the last time you ate a proper meal?" Tommy couldn't remember. Yesterday? 2 days ago? "You can't help Beth if you're dead, son. You need to take care of yourself too." But Tommy wasn't listening. He was staring at his empty hands, at the prescription paper lying in the dirt, at the impossibility of his situation. He'd reached the end. There was nowhere left to turn, no options left to try. His daughter was dying and he was completely, utterly helpless to save her. That's when he heard the horse. Big hooves on the packed dirt street, the kind of sound that made people stop and look. Tommy raised his head and saw something that made him wonder if he'd hit his head harder than he thought. Riding toward them was the biggest woman he'd ever seen in his life. Sitting tall on a massive draft horse that looked small under her, the widow Vandenberg had come to town. And for reasons Tommy couldn't begin to understand, she was staring right at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust. It was something else entirely. Something that looked almost like recognition, like she'd been searching for something and just now found it. Tommy had no way of knowing it then, but his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The solution to his impossible problem was dismounting from that horse, and it came in the most unexpected package possible. Everyone in Redemption Creek knew about the widow Vandenberg, but hardly anyone actually knew her. She was more legend than person, more story than reality. And like most legends, the stories got bigger and stranger with each telling. Her name was Greta, though most folks were too intimidated to use it. She lived up on Vandenberg Ranch, the biggest spread in 3 counties, 10,000 acres of prime land, 300 head of cattle, the best water rights in the territory, and a house that looked more like a mansion than anything that belonged in cattle country. But it wasn't her wealth that made people talk. It was her. Greta Vandenberg stood 6 feet 9 inches tall in her stockings. She had shoulders like a lumberjack, arms that could wrestle a bull, and hands that could palm a man's head like an apple. She wasn't fat, just big. Big in every direction, built on a scale that made regular people look like children's toys. Her late husband, Henrik Vandenberg, had been a short, thin man with a head for business and a heart condition. He'd inherited the ranch from his father and built it into an empire through smart deals and careful management. When he married Greta, people thought he'd lost his mind. She'd been an immigrant girl from somewhere up in Scandinavia, working as a farmhand and standing a foot taller than any man she worked alongside. But Henrik had seen something in her beyond the unusual size. He'd seen strength, intelligence, and a work ethic that put other men to shame. They'd been married for 8 years when his heart finally gave out during a simple ride to check on the northern pastures. He'd been 42. Greta had been 30. That was 5 years ago, and Greta hadn't been the same since. She ran the ranch herself now better than most men could. She could break a horse, mend a fence, deliver a calf, and balance the books all in the same day. Her ranch hands respected her because she worked harder than any of them and paid fair wages. But respect and friendship are different things, and Greta had precious little of the latter. The town women crossed the street when they saw her coming. Not out of fear exactly, but out of something worse. Discomfort. She didn't fit their idea of what a woman should be. She wore men's work clothes because women's dresses didn't come in her size. She spoke in a deep voice that carried across fields. She didn't giggle or blush or do any of the things proper ladies did. The church ladies whispered that it was unnatural for a woman to be so large. They said maybe it was a curse or bad blood or some kind of punishment. They said Henrik must have been under some kind of spell to marry her. They said a lot of things, none of them kind, all of them ignorant. The men weren't much better. Some were intimidated, afraid of a woman who could probably whip them in a fair fight. Others made crude jokes when they thought she couldn't hear, though she heard every word. Her hearing was as sharp as everything else about her. Greta learned to ignore it all. She built walls around herself thick as castle stones. She focused on work, on the ranch, on making money and expanding her property. She was the richest person in the county and the loneliest, but money can't buy you conversation at dinner. Success can't keep you warm at night. And property doesn't laugh at your jokes or hold your hand during thunderstorms. Henrik used to do those things. He'd been small enough that Greta could rest her chin on his head when they hugged, but he'd never made her feel strange about it. He'd loved her, genuinely loved her, and after he died, Greta realized she'd probably never find that again. Who would want her? Who could even look past her size to see the person underneath? She'd tried in those first years after Henrik's death. She'd cleaned up, put on her best clothes, attended church socials. But the other widows treated her like a curiosity, and the single men acted like she didn't exist. One particularly cruel cowboy had laughed in her face when she'd tried to make conversation, saying he didn't dance with circus freaks. She'd gone home that night and cried for hours. Then she'd made herself a promise. Never again. She'd be alone, but she'd be alone with dignity. She'd run her ranch, make her money, and not let anyone make her feel less than human ever again. But sometimes late at night the loneliness crept in like cold fog. The house was too big, too empty, too quiet. She'd walk through rooms that Henrik had filled with laughter and love, and now they just echoed. She'd set the table for one and eat while reading ranch reports because looking at the empty chairs hurt too much. What Greta wanted more than anything was family, not romance necessarily, though she missed the warmth of companionship. But family, the kind where you sit around a table and talk about your day, where someone asks how you're feeling and actually cares about the answer, where you're not just a boss or a property owner, but a person who matters to someone. She'd thought about adopting a child, but the orphanage matron had looked at her like she was suggesting something scandalous. A single woman? Without a husband? And, well, given your situation? The woman had gestured vaguely at Greta's size like it was a contagious disease, so Greta stayed alone. She grew harder, tougher, more isolated. She stopped going to town except when absolutely necessary. She dealt with ranch business through her foreman. She built her walls higher and thicker until she was practically a prisoner in her own success. But she still watched families from a distance. She'd ride near town sometimes and see fathers teaching sons to rope cattle, mothers braiding daughters' hair, families laughing together on their porches. It made her chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with physical pain. One thing kept nagging at her mind. Henrik used to say that being married gave him standing in the community. People trusted a married man more than a bachelor. They invited him to important meetings, asked his opinion, respected his word. After he died, some of that respect transferred to Greta as his widow, but it was fading. People were starting to question why such a wealthy woman hadn't remarried. Was something wrong with her? Well, beyond the obvious, Greta had started to think practically about it. If she couldn't have love again, maybe she could have partnership. Maybe she could find a man who needed what she had to offer, and who could offer her something in return. Not romance, but something equally valuable: legitimacy, companionship, family. It was this thought that had brought her to town that September morning. She needed supplies she couldn't send her foreman for, and she'd decided to face the whispers and stares head on. She was riding her biggest draft horse, a gentle giant named Thor, who was the only horse that could carry her without complaint. As she rode down Main Street, she saw the usual reactions. Women gathering their children like Greta might step on them, men stopping their conversations to stare, shopkeepers suddenly very interested in their store windows. Then she saw the crowd outside the general store. Something had happened. Someone had collapsed. The local doctor was bent over a figure on the bench, and people were murmuring in that particular way that meant gossip was flowing like water. Greta guided Thor closer, more out of curiosity than concern. Then she heard a name that made her pay attention. Poor Tommy Mercer. Man's at the end of his rope. That daughter of his is dying, you know. Needs medicine he can't afford. Heard the bank's taking his ranch next month. Shame, really. He's a good man. Just had terrible luck. Greta looked at the man on the bench. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of weathered face that came from hard work and harder worries. His clothes were patched and worn, his boots falling apart. But there was something in his face, even unconscious, that spoke of decency. Of the kind of man who'd work himself to death before he'd let down someone who depended on him. And he had a daughter. A sick daughter who needed help. An idea began to form in Greta's mind. It was crazy, probably impossible, definitely unconventional. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. She needed a husband for respectability and companionship. He needed money to save his daughter. She had a huge house and no family. He had a daughter but no resources. She could provide everything he needed materially. He could provide her with the family structure she craved. It was transactional, yes. Unromantic, absolutely. But maybe that's what they both needed. Clear expectations, honest terms, mutual benefit. No pretense of love, just honest partnership based on what each could give the other. And that little girl. Greta felt something twist in her chest thinking about a child dying because of poverty. She had more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes. What good was it all if she couldn't use it to save one little girl's life? Greta made a decision right there on Main Street, sitting on her horse while people whispered about her behind their hands. She was going to make Tommy Mercer an offer he couldn't refuse, not because she was forcing him, but because it was the solution they both desperately needed. She'd visit him that evening at his ranch. She'd lay out the terms clearly, no tricks, no games. He could accept or refuse, but either way, she'd make sure his daughter got the medicine she needed. Some things were more important than pride or convention or what the church ladies thought. As she rode away to conduct her business, Greta felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the loneliness for her, and a way forward for him. It wouldn't be traditional, it wouldn't be what anyone expected, but it might just work. Tommy was sitting on his porch that evening, watching the sun paint the sky orange and purple when he heard the horse coming up his road. Not just any horse. The heavy rhythmic sound of hooves that meant serious weight and size. He stood up, squinting into the dust. A rider was approaching, backlit by the setting sun so he couldn't make out details. Then the figure got closer and Tommy's eyes went wide. The widow Vandenberg. Riding right up to his failing ranch like she had business there. Tommy's first thought was that she'd bought his debt from the bank and was here to claim the property early. His second thought was that maybe he was still unconscious in town, and this was some kind of fever dream. Neither option seemed good. Greta dismounted with practiced ease, which was impressive for someone her size. She tied her horse to the porch rail and turned to face Tommy. Up close, she was even more imposing than from a distance. She had to be nearly 7 feet tall, with a build that made Tommy feel like a child. "Mr. Mercer," she said in that deep, carrying voice of hers. "My name is Greta Vandenberg. We need to talk." Tommy's mouth was dry. "Ma'am, what can I do for you?" "May I come inside?" What I have to say isn't for the whole valley to hear. Something in her tone made him nod. He led her into his small house, acutely aware of how shabby it must look to someone who lived in that mansion on the hill. The furniture was old, the rugs worn thin, the walls in need of paint. From the bedroom he heard Beth cough, that wet rattling sound that kept him up at night. "Your daughter?" Greta asked, her expression softening slightly. "Yes, ma'am, Beth, she's 5. I heard in town what happened today. I know about your situation." Tommy felt his face flush hot. "Everyone knows about my situation. They can't stop talking about it. I'm the town charity case, the warning story mothers tell their sons about what happens when you don't plan ahead." "That's not why I'm here," Greta said firmly. "I'm here to make you a proposal. A business proposition, if you will." Tommy gestured to the worn couch and Greta sat carefully. The furniture creaked but held. He took a chair across from her, waiting. Greta didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'm going to be direct, Mr. Mercer, because we're both adults and time is something your daughter doesn't have much of. I need a husband. You need money to save your daughter. I believe we can help each other." Tommy blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "A marriage of convenience. You marry me, move into my ranch with your daughter. I provide all the medical care, medicine, specialists, whatever she needs. I'll also settle your debts, restore your ranch here, and provide you with a steady income for managing my properties." Tommy's mind reeled. "Ma'am, why would you?" Greta held up a hand. "Let me finish. I'm not proposing a love match, Mr. Mercer. I'm proposing a partnership. I'm a wealthy widow living alone in a house too big for one person. The town questions why I haven't remarried. People trust married couples more than single women in my position. I need the respectability and legitimacy that comes with having a husband. But surely there are men who would—" Tommy trailed off, seeing her expression. "Who would marry me for love? For desire?" Greta's laugh was bitter. "Look at me, Mr. Mercer. I'm nearly 7 feet tall and built like a draft horse. Men don't write poetry about women like me. They cross the street to avoid me. I accepted a long time ago that my late husband was likely my only chance at a real marriage. Tommy didn't know what to say to that. But I can offer you something valuable, Greta continued. Security. Resources. Most importantly, I can save your daughter's life. And in return, you give me companionship, help with the ranch, and the social standing that comes with being a married woman again. What about, the marriage part? Tommy's face was red. Separate bedrooms. This is a business arrangement. I'm not asking for romance or physical intimacy, just partnership. You'd be free to live your life and I'd live mine, but we'd present a united front to the world, and we'd both be there for your daughter. Tommy stood up and paced. This is insane. People would talk, people already talk, about both of us. The difference is after this they'd have to talk to our faces or shut their mouths. I don't love you. I don't even know you. I don't love you either. But I respect what you're trying to do for your daughter. That kind of devotion matters more than romantic feelings. Tommy went to the window looking out at his dying ranch. What about Beth? What would she think? Children are resilient and honest. She'd understand that sometimes parents make hard choices to protect them. Besides, I've always wanted a daughter. I'd treat her as my own, Mr. Mercer. I'd give her everything I have, not just money, but time, attention, and care. Why me? Tommy turned back to face her. You could have anyone. Someone more successful, more educated. Greta met his eyes steadily. Because I saw you collapse in town today fighting to get medicine for your daughter. I saw a man who's worked himself to exhaustion trying to save a child. That's the kind of character that can't be bought or faked. That's the kind of man I can trust. Tommy walked to Beth's door and cracked it open. His daughter was sleeping fitfully, her small chest rising and falling irregularly. Doc Harrison's words echoed in his head. Won't see Christmas. I need time to think, he said quietly. Of course, but not too much time. I meant what I said about your daughter. With or without the marriage, I'll make sure she gets treatment. Consider that my good faith offer. Tomorrow morning, I'm sending my doctor from the city to examine her. No strings attached, Tommy spun around. What? I'm not a monster, Mr. Mercer. I won't let a child die while you wrestle with your pride. The medical help starts now. The marriage proposal is separate. You can accept one without the other, though I hope you'll consider both. Tears stung Tommy's eyes. Why? Why would you do that? Greta stood, towering over him, but somehow not threatening. Because I have more money than I can ever use, and it's worthless if it can't save one little girl's life. Because I know what it's like to feel helpless and alone. Because maybe, just maybe, we can help each other build something better than what we have now. She moved toward the door, then paused. I'll give you 3 days to decide. The doctor will arrive tomorrow morning. His name is Dr. Chen. He's from San Francisco, and he's the best. Whatever he prescribes, whatever Beth needs, send the bills to me. I can't just accept charity, Tommy protested weakly. It's not charity. Consider it an investment in my future stepdaughter. If you accept my proposal, she becomes family. If you don't, consider it payment for all the entertainment this town has gotten from gossiping about both of us. Despite everything, Tommy almost smiled at that. Greta untied her horse and mounted up. From her elevated position, she looked down at Tommy one last time. I'm not asking you to love me, Mr. Mercer. I'm not even asking you to like me particularly. I'm asking you to be my partner in building a life that works for both of us. Think about it. She rode off into the gathering darkness, leaving Tommy standing on his porch with his mind spinning like a dust devil. The next 3 days were the longest of Tommy's life. True to her word, Dr. Chen arrived the next morning in a fancy buggy with more medical equipment than Doc Harrison probably owned. He examined Beth thoroughly, asked hundreds of questions, and took notes in a leather journal. The child is severely malnourished and her respiratory system is compromised, Dr. Chen announced. But with proper treatment, nutritious food, clean air, and the right medications, I believe she can make a full recovery. It won't be quick and it won't be cheap, but it's absolutely possible. Tommy had sat down hard when he heard that. A full recovery. His little girl could actually get better. Dr. Chen prescribed a regimen of medicines, special foods, and treatments. He arranged for everything to be delivered and set up a schedule for follow-up visits. When Tommy asked about payment, the doctor just smiled and said, Mrs. Vandenberg has handled all expenses. Your only job is to follow the treatment plan. That first night after starting the new medicine, Beth slept through without coughing once. Tommy sat by her bed, watching her breathe easily for the first time in months, and cried. But the question remained. The marriage proposal. Tommy wrestled with his pride. He was a man. Men were supposed to provide for their families, not marry wealthy women for their money. What would people say? What would Beth think when she was old enough to understand? But then he'd look at his daughter, actually eating a full meal for the first time in weeks, actually smiling and playing a little. And the answer became clearer. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Beth's life was more important than his ego, or what the town gossips thought. On the evening of the third day, Tommy rode up to Vandenberg Ranch. The place was even more impressive up close. The house was 3 stories, painted white with a wide wraparound porch. The barns were bigger than most people's houses. Everything was clean, maintained, prosperous. A ranch hand directed him to the main house. Tommy knocked and Greta answered herself. She was wearing a simple dress, clearly custom-made, and her hair was pulled back. She looked nervous. It humanized her somehow, seeing that vulnerability. "Mr. Mercer, have you decided?" Tommy took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "I have conditions. I'm listening. Beth comes first, always. Every decision we make considers what's best for her." "Agreed." The wedding happened on a Tuesday morning at the courthouse, with only the judge and 2 witnesses present. No flowers, no fancy dress, no celebration. Just 2 people signing papers and making legal what had started as a business deal. Greta wore her best dress, dark blue with simple styling. Tommy wore the only suit he owned, which had belonged to his father and was a bit too big on him. Neither wore wedding rings because they'd agreed this wasn't that kind of marriage. The judge, old Henry Watson, looked between them with barely concealed shock. He'd known both of them for years and couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. But the paperwork was in order. They were both of age and sound mind, and there was no legal reason to refuse them. "Do you, Tommy Mercer, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Greta Vandenberg, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may. Well, you may kiss the bride, though I suppose that won't be necessary," Greta said quickly, and Tommy nodded in agreement. They walked out of the courthouse as a married couple, and by noon the whole town knew. The general store buzzed with gossip. The saloon erupted in speculation. The church ladies clutched their pearls and declared it the scandal of the decade. "Did you hear Tommy Mercer married the Vandenberg widow?" "Married her for money, obviously. What else would it be? Poor man must have been desperate, or smart. She's rich as a railroad baron. It's not natural. A woman that size and a normal man. I give it 6 months before he runs off with the money." Tommy heard the whispers when he went to collect his things from the old ranch. He ignored them. Let them talk. Beth's medicines were working. That's all that mattered. Moving day was strange. Tommy had so few possessions that they fit in a single wagon. His clothes, Beth's things, a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value, and a photograph of his late wife. Everything else he left for whoever the bank sold the property to. Beth had been excited about the move. At 5 years old, she didn't fully understand the situation, but she knew that the big, nice lady was making her feel better, and they were going to live in a huge house. "Will I have my own room, Papa?" she'd asked that morning. "Yes, sweetheart, a big one." "And the lady, she's going to be my new mama?" Tommy had knelt down to her level. "She's going to take care of us, yes. You can call her whatever feels right. Miss Greta, or we'll figure it out together." "She's really big, Papa." "She is. Does that bother you?" Beth had thought about it seriously. "No. She has kind eyes. Like when you smile with your eyes, not just your mouth. She does that." Tommy had been surprised by his daughter's perception. Maybe kids saw things adults missed. The Vandenberg house was overwhelming at first. The entryway alone was bigger than the entire main room of their old house. There were multiple sitting rooms, a formal dining room, a library, and upstairs, more bedrooms than Tommy could count on one hand. Greta met them at the door, looking as nervous as Tommy felt. "Welcome home," she said, and the word home hung in the air awkwardly. She showed them around, and Tommy tried not to gape at everything. The furniture was fine, the rugs imported, the curtains expensive. There was running water, which was still a luxury in these parts, and a modern kitchen that made cooking easier. "Beth, your room is upstairs," Greta said, and her voice softened when she addressed the child. "I had it prepared special. Would you like to see it?" Beth took Greta's offered hand without hesitation, and Tommy followed them upstairs. When Greta opened the door to Beth's new room, the little girl gasped. It was painted soft yellow with curtains featuring little flowers. There was a real bed with a thick mattress and warm quilts, a dresser, a rocking chair, and in the corner, a pile of toys and books. "For me," Beth whispered. "All for you," Greta confirmed. "The books are for when you're feeling better and can read longer. The toys are for now, and that rocking chair was mine when I was a girl in the old country. My father made it special to hold someone my size, so it's very sturdy." Beth ran to the toys, her eyes wide. Tommy couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her this excited. "Thank you," he said quietly to Greta. "You didn't have to do all this." "Yes, I did. She's part of this family now. That means she gets what she needs, and some of what she wants too." Over the next few days, they established a routine. Tommy woke early and worked with the ranch hands, learning how Greta managed the operation. She was a tough but fair boss, and the men respected her. They were curious about Tommy, but welcomed him once they saw he wasn't afraid of hard work. Greta managed the business side, dealing with buyers, contracts, and finances. She was sharp as a tack with numbers and could spot a bad deal from a mile away. Tommy found himself impressed despite his initial uncertainty. Beth's health improved dramatically. With good food 3 times a day, clean air, proper medicine, and warm, comfortable sleeping conditions, her color returned. The coughing fits became less frequent. She started to play and laugh more. Dr. Chen visited weekly, monitoring her progress. "Remarkable improvement," he reported. "Another few months of this care and she should be nearly normal. You've given this child her life back." But the living situation was awkward. Tommy had his own bedroom, large and comfortable, right next to Greta's. They'd pass each other in the hallway, exchange polite good mornings, and go about their separate days. Meals were the most uncomfortable time. They'd sit at the long dining table, Tommy at one end, Greta at the other, with Beth between them, chattering away while the adults made stilted conversation. "How are the cattle today?" Greta would ask. "Good. Fixed the fence on the north pasture." "Thank you." Silence. "How are the accounts?" Tommy would try. "Fine. Sold some stock to the buyer from Denver." "That's good." More silence. Beth would look. Between them with those perceptive 5-year-old eyes, like she could see how hard they were both trying, and how awkward it all was. The ranch hands noticed too. One afternoon, Tommy overheard 2 of them talking by the barn. "Strangest marriage I ever seen. They act like strangers boarding in the same house. Give 'em time. It's only been a week. My bet is he's gone by Christmas. Takes the girl and runs." Tommy had wanted to confront them but didn't. What would he say? They weren't exactly wrong. But something started to shift around the end of the second week. Small things at first. Tommy came in from work one evening to find Greta teaching Beth how to knead bread dough. Beth's little hands were covered in flour and she was giggling. Greta was smiling, really smiling, and showing Beth how to fold the dough just right. "Like this?" Beth asked. "Perfect. You're a natural baker." Something about the scene made Tommy's chest feel tight. Not in a bad way. In a way that reminded him of family, of home, of things he thought he'd lost forever. Another evening, Tommy found Greta reading to Beth before bed. She was sitting in that oversized rocking chair, and Beth was curled up in her lap, looking tiny against Greta's frame. Greta's deep voice was surprisingly gentle as she read from a storybook, doing different voices for different characters. Beth saw Tommy in the doorway and waved sleepily. "Papa, Miss Greta is reading about a princess and a dragon." "Is the princess going to fight the dragon?" Tommy asked, coming in to sit on the edge of the bed. "She already did," Beth said proudly. "She won." "A smart princess knows how to handle herself," Greta said, catching Tommy's eye over Beth's head. There was something in her expression, a vulnerability that Tommy hadn't seen before. They tucked Beth in together, and as they walked out, Greta said quietly, "She asked if she could call me Mama Greta. I said she should ask you first." Tommy stopped in the hallway. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd be honored, but only if you were comfortable with it." Tommy thought about his late wife, about Beth's birth mother who she'd never known. Would she be angry? Or would she want her daughter to have someone who cared for her this much? "She can call you whatever feels right to her," Tommy said finally. "You're the one tucking her in at night, teaching her to bake, reading her stories. That's what a mama does." Greta's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you." As weeks passed, the awkwardness began to ease. Not completely, but enough that meals weren't torture anymore. They started talking about real things. Ranch decisions, Beth's progress, even bits of their pasts. Tommy learned that Greta had come to America at 16, running from a father who beat her for being too big, too strange, too much. She'd worked her way across the country, doing jobs most men couldn't handle, saving every penny until Henrik had found her and seen her worth. Greta learned that Tommy's wife had been his childhood sweetheart, and her death in childbirth had nearly destroyed him. That he'd spent the last 5 years just surviving, never really living, until Beth got sick and forced him to fight again. They learned they both loved coffee in the morning, silence in the evening, and had the same dry sense of humor. They discovered they could work together well, that Tommy's practical skills and Greta's strategic thinking complemented each other. One night, about a month in, they were sitting on the porch after Beth had gone to bed. The stars were out bright and clear in the country darkness. "This is working better than I expected," Greta said quietly. "Yeah," Tommy agreed. "It is. Beth is thriving, because of you." The trouble started on a cold October night. Tommy woke to the sound of cattle bawling in distress. It wasn't normal nighttime sounds. This was panic. He threw on his clothes and rushed downstairs to find Greta already pulling on her boots, rifle in hand. "Rustlers," she said grimly. "4th ranch hit this month. I was wondering when they'd get to us." "Stay here with Beth," Tommy said, reaching for the rifle rack. Greta gave him a look that could have melted steel. "This is my ranch, Tommy. I'm not hiding in the house while someone steals my cattle." "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant, and I appreciate it. But I've been defending this place for 5 years. I'm not stopping now." They headed out together into the darkness. The ranch hands were already gathering, armed and angry. Greta's foreman, a tough old cowboy named Pete, filled them in. Looks like 6 or 7 riders down by the south pasture. They've already cut about 50 head from the herd and are trying to move them out. "How well armed?" Greta asked. "Well enough. Saw at least 3 rifles." Tommy studied the situation. "If they're moving cattle, they'll be going slow. We can cut them off at Miller's Pass if we ride hard." "That's a dangerous play," Pete said. "Narrow passage, easy to get trapped." "Or easy to trap them," Greta countered. "Tommy's right. It's our best chance." They split up. Pete took half the men the long way around to block the eastern route. Tommy, Greta, and 3 ranch hands rode hard for Miller's Pass. The ride was rough, rocky terrain in near darkness. Greta handled her big horse like she was born in the saddle, keeping pace with the men easily. Tommy found himself impressed despite the situation. They reached the pass just as the rustlers were pushing the stolen cattle through. In the moonlight, Tommy could see them clearly. 7 men, all armed, all looking rough as sandpaper. "This is a bad idea," one of the ranch hands muttered. "It's the only idea," Greta said. She raised her voice, projecting it across the pass. "That's far enough. Those are my cattle and you're on my land." The rustlers turned, surprised to hear a woman's voice. One of them, a big man with a scar across his face, laughed. "Well, boys, looks like the giant woman decided to come out and play." "Turn those cattle around and ride off," Greta commanded. "Do it now and nobody gets hurt, or what?" Scarface jeered. "You gonna stop us? You and your ranch hands?" "There's 7 of us, lady. There's also 10 more coming up behind you," Tommy added. It was a bluff. Pete's group was still 10 minutes away, but the lie worked. The rustlers looked nervous, checking over their shoulders. "We ain't afraid of no woman," one of them said, but his voice shook. That's when things went wrong. One of the younger rustlers, probably nervous and trigger-happy, fired a shot. It went wide, but it set off chaos. The cattle spooked and started stampeding. The horses reared. Everyone scattered. Tommy saw Greta's horse buck hard. She kept her seat but barely. Then a rustler rode straight at her, clearly thinking she'd be an easy target. Big mistake. Greta waited until he was close. Then in one smooth motion, she grabbed the man right out of his saddle. Just reached out with one hand and yanked him off his horse like he was a sack of grain. The rustler hit the ground hard and stayed there. "Anyone else want to try?" she called out. The other rustlers were backing off now, especially seeing their companion on the ground. The stampeding cattle were making it hard to organize any kind of attack. Tommy fired a shot in the air. "Next one's not a warning." That did it. The rustlers turned tail and ran, abandoning the stolen cattle and their unconscious friend. They disappeared into the darkness, and within minutes, Pete and the rest of the hands arrived to help round up the spooked cattle. The crisis was over. Back at the ranch, as dawn was breaking, Tommy and Greta stood by the corral, both exhausted and covered in dust. "That was foolish," Tommy said. "Which part?" "The part where you grabbed that man off his horse. He could have shot you. He could have shot you too. We were all taking risks, but you didn't have to—" "What? Act like a woman?" Greta's voice had an edge now. "Hide behind the men? Let them fight my battles?" "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Greta turned to face him fully. "I appreciate that you want to protect me, Tommy, but I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I don't need protecting." Tommy ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I know you can take care of yourself. You proved that tonight. But we're partners now, remember? Partners watch each other's backs." Greta's expression softened slightly. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm used to people thinking I can't do things because I'm a woman, or thinking I need to prove myself constantly because of my size." "I don't think either of those things," Tommy said quietly. "Tonight, watching you out there, I thought two things. One, you're tougher than most men I know. And two, I'm glad you're on my side." Something passed between them in that moment, a kind of understanding that went deeper than words. "We make a good team," Greta said finally. "Yeah, we do." Later that morning, Beth came running out to the porch where they were having coffee. She'd heard about the night's excitement from the cook. "Mama Greta, you fought bad men?" Her eyes were wide. "We sent some bad men away," Greta corrected gently. "Your papa and I worked together to protect the ranch." "Was it scary?" "A little," Greta admitted. "But it's okay to be scared sometimes. Brave isn't not being scared. Brave is doing what needs to be done even when you are scared." Beth climbed into Greta's lap, something she'd started doing regularly. "I want to be brave like you." "You already are, little one. You've been fighting to get healthy, and that takes bravery too." Tommy watched them together and felt that tightness in his chest again. It was happening more and more lately. Every time he saw Greta with Beth, every time she said something wise or kind, every time she showed that underneath the tough exterior was someone capable of such gentleness. The weeks following the rustler incident changed something between Tommy and Greta. They started talking more. Really talking. Not just about ranch business or Beth, but about everything. They'd sit on the porch in the evenings after Beth was asleep and the conversations would flow. Greta told him about her childhood in Sweden, about being different even there, about the long journey to America. Tommy talked about his dreams of expanding the ranch someday, about his late wife without feeling guilty about it, about his fears for Beth's future. Greta started asking his opinion on ranch decisions, really listening to his input. Tommy started noticing small things she did, like leaving his favorite coffee cup out in the morning, or making sure his work gloves were by the door. One evening, a cold snap hit hard. Tommy came in from checking on the livestock to find Greta had made hot stew and fresh bread. The house smelled amazing, warm and welcoming. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "That's what we pay the cook for." "I wanted to," Greta said simply. "Besides, this is my mother's recipe. Thought you might like it." The stew was delicious, rich and hearty. Tommy told her so, and Greta actually blushed a little. "It's been a long time since someone appreciated my cooking," she said. Beth chattered happily through dinner, telling them about the new words she'd learned to read and the picture she'd drawn. She'd created a family portrait. A tiny stick figure labeled Beth, a medium stick figure labeled Papa, and a very tall stick figure labeled Mama Greta, all holding hands in front of a house. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Tommy said, his voice a bit rough. It's us, Beth explained unnecessarily. Our family. Later, after Beth was in bed, Tommy found Greta in the library holding the drawing. There were tears on her cheeks. Greta. He'd never seen her cry before. I'm fine, she said quickly, wiping her face. It's silly. What is? I never thought I'd have this. A child calling me Mama. A family portrait with me in it. I thought that part of life was over for me. Tommy sat down next to her. Not too close, respecting their boundaries, but close enough to talk quietly. You're really good with her, you know. Beth adores you. She's easy to love. She's such a bright, sweet child. Thanks to you. You saved her life. We saved her life, Greta corrected. You're the one who never gave up on her when things looked hopeless. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Can I ask you something? Tommy said, Of course. That night with the rustlers. When you grabbed that man off his horse, how did you do that? He had to weigh at least 200 pounds. Greta actually smiled. Practice. When you're my size, you learn early how to use your strength. And you learn that most people underestimate you. That man saw a woman and assumed I was weak. Big mistake. I'm glad I never assumed that. You didn't, that's one of the things Greta paused, seeming to catch herself. One of the things I appreciate about you. There was something in her voice, something she wasn't saying. Tommy felt it too, that pull between them that was growing stronger. But neither was ready to name it yet. So they sat together in the library, comfortable in each other's company, while the fire crackled and the house settled around them. Outside, the first snow of the season started to fall. Inside, slowly but surely, a real family was being built. Not through blood or romance, but through trust, respect, and shared trials that forged bonds stronger than either had expected. Winter came to Redemption Creek with a vengeance. Heavy snows buried the roads and temperatures dropped so low that water froze in the pipes. The ranch became its own little world, isolated from town for days at a time. Tommy found himself spending more time indoors, and that meant more time with Greta. They'd work together in the ranch office, going over accounts and planning for spring. They'd help Beth with her lessons. They'd share meals and stories, and slowly, without quite realizing when it happened, they became friends. Real friends. Greta started doing little things that made Tommy's life easier. She'd have his coffee ready exactly how he liked it. She'd mend his shirts when they tore, her big hands surprisingly delicate with needle and thread. She'd save articles from the newspaper that she thought he'd find interesting. Tommy found himself returning the gestures. He'd stable her horse after she rode in, saving her the trip to the barn in the cold. He'd fix things around the house before she had to ask. He'd bring her wildflowers he found during his rounds just because he thought she might like them. The wildflowers thing surprised even him. He'd been checking the fence line one afternoon when he spotted some hardy winter blooms surviving in a sheltered spot. Without thinking, he'd picked them. Then he'd spent the whole ride back to the house wondering what he was doing. They'd agreed this wasn't a romantic marriage. So why was he bringing her flowers? But when he gave them to her, trying to play it casual, the look on her face made his heart skip. Tommy, these are beautiful, she said softly, cradling them like they were precious jewels. Thought they'd brighten up the kitchen, he'd mumbled. They do. Thank you. She'd put them in a vase on the kitchen table, and Tommy caught her smiling at them several times that day. Beth noticed everything, of course. Kids always do. One evening, she was sitting between them on the couch while Greta read aloud, and she looked up at Tommy with those knowing eyes. Papa, do you like Mama Greta? Tommy's mouth went dry. Of course I like her, sweetheart. No, I mean, do you like her like Mama? Like how people like each other when they get married for real? Greta's reading had stopped. The silence in the room was heavy. Beth, honey, sometimes grown-ups have different kinds of marriages. Tommy started. But you smile at her now. Beth said simply, you didn't before. And she smiles at you too, and you sit closer than you used to. And yesterday I saw Papa hold Mama Greta's hand when she was sad about Mr. Henrik. Both adults looked at their hands. They had been holding hands yesterday when Greta had been emotional about something that reminded her of her late husband. Neither had really thought about it. Beth, it's complicated, Greta said gently. Why? If you like each other, it's not complicated. That's what you told me about making friends. Out of the mouths of babes. After Beth was tucked in that night, Tommy and Greta stood in the hallway between their bedrooms. The conversation hung between them unfinished. She's not wrong, Tommy said quietly. About which part? I do smile at you now. And I didn't before. Greta leaned against her doorframe. I smile at you too. More than I've smiled in years. When did that happen? When did we stop being business partners and start being… whatever this is? I don't know. Somewhere between the rustlers in the winter and Beth's family portrait, I think. Tommy stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. I need to be honest with you, Greta, this scares me. Me too. My late wife, I loved her with everything I had. And losing her almost killed me. I swore I'd never open myself up to that kind of pain again. I understand. Henrik was my whole world. When he died, I thought that part of me died too. I never expected to feel anything like that again, but I'm starting to feel things I wasn't prepared for. When you're out in bad weather, I worry. When you laugh at Beth's jokes, my heart feels warm. When you brought me those flowers, I felt like a girl again, not a freak that nobody wanted. Tommy reached up and gently took her hand. You're not a freak. You're amazing. You're strong and smart and kind. You're an incredible mother to Beth, and you're beautiful. Greta's eyes widened. Tommy, I'm not… Yes, you are. Maybe not in the way those town ladies are, but you're beautiful to me. The way you care for Beth, the way you run this ranch, the way you face challenges head on. Even just the way you smile when you think nobody's watching. That's beautiful. A tear rolled down Greta's cheek. No one's ever said that to me before. Even Henrik, as much as he loved me, he never called me beautiful. Then Henrik was a fool in that one way, though I'm grateful to him for seeing your worth even if he couldn't see all of it. They stood there, hands clasped, the hallway light casting soft shadows. What do we do now? Greta whispered. I don't know. Take it slow. We don't have to rush anything. We're already married, after all. We've got all the time in the world. Greta laughed softly. That's true. We did this backwards, didn't we? Got married first, now we're courting. Is that what this is? Courting? I think so, if you want it to be. Tommy squeezed her hand. I do, but Greta, I need you to know something. I'm not Henrik. I can't replace him. I don't want you to. And I'm not your late wife. We're not replacing anyone. We're building something new. Something that's just ours. I like that. Something just ours. They said goodnight and went to their separate rooms, but something fundamental had shifted. They'd named what was happening between them, and that made it real. The next weeks were different. They still maintained separate bedrooms, still kept appropriate boundaries, but there was a warmth now that hadn't been there before. Greta started cooking Tommy's favorite meals without being asked. Tommy would find excuses to touch her hand, her shoulder, simple gestures that said, I'm here, I care. One particularly brutal storm hit, and the temperature in the house dropped dramatically. The fireplaces couldn't keep up with the cold. Tommy found Beth and Greta huddled together in the main room, wrapped in every blanket they could find. The fireplace in the east wing went out, Greta explained. I think the chimney's blocked with ice. Mine too, Tommy said. This fireplace is the only one working. Beth was shivering despite the blankets. Her health was so much better, but she was still vulnerable to extreme cold. We need to stay together, Greta said. Pool our warmth. They piled every blanket and quilt in the house around the working fireplace. Tommy sat on one side of Beth, Greta on the other, and they wrapped everything around all three of them. As the night wore on and the storm raged outside, they huddled closer. Beth fell asleep between them, warm and safe. Tommy found his arm around Greta's shoulders. Her arm was around his waist. It was innocent, necessary for warmth, but it was also the closest they'd been since getting married. This reminds me of winters in Sweden, Greta said quietly. My whole family would sleep in one room when it got really cold. 10 of us all piled together. I hated it then. Thought it was because we were poor. But now I think maybe I miss it. The closeness? The family? The feeling of belonging somewhere. Tommy pulled her closer. You belong here. With us. Do I, really? Or am I just the wealthy woman who bought a husband and daughter? Greta, look at me. She did, her eyes uncertain. You're not buying anything. You're building something. You're Beth's mother in every way that matters. You're my… He hesitated. You're what? My partner, my friend. And maybe, if you're willing, something more. More sounds good, Greta said softly. They stayed like that through the night, the three of them wrapped together, the storm outside, and the fire inside. When Tommy woke at dawn, he found his head resting on Greta's shoulder, her head resting on his, and Beth sprawled across both their laps. It felt right. It felt like family. It felt like home. The storm cleared by afternoon, but something had changed. They'd crossed a line in the night, moved from polite coexistence to genuine intimacy. Not physical intimacy necessarily, but emotional closeness that ran deeper. After that night, Tommy started saying goodnight with a kiss on Greta's cheek. She'd turn pink every time, pleased but shy. Greta started leaving notes in Tommy's lunch pail, little messages that made him smile during the workday. Beth was delighted by all of it. She'd catch them holding hands and grin like she'd won a prize. She'd find excuses to push them together. Innocent child manipulations that both adults saw through but allowed anyway. One evening, about 3 months into winter, they were all in the kitchen. Greta was making dinner, Tommy was fixing a broken chair, and Beth was coloring at the table. It was ordinary, domestic, and perfect. Beth started singing a song she'd learned, something about families and love. Her voice was clear and sweet. No more rattling cough, no more weakness. Tommy caught Greta's eye across the kitchen. She was looking at Beth with such love, such joy, that it took his breath away. That's when Tommy knew. He didn't just respect Greta. He didn't just appreciate her. He loved her, really, truly loved her. The realization should have scared him more than it did. But instead it felt like coming home after a long journey. It felt right. He couldn't tell her yet. It was too soon, too much. But he knew. And from the way Greta looked at him sometimes, soft and wondering, he suspected she knew too. They had started as a business deal. They'd become partners, then friends. And now slowly but surely they were becoming something neither had dared to hope for. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived it brought more than just melting snow and budding flowers. It brought trouble in the form of a telegram from Springfield. Tommy was in the barn when Greta came running, her face pale, the paper clutched in her hand. He'd never seen her look frightened before, and it made his stomach drop. "What is it?" "It's about Beth, Tommy, my late wife's family. They're coming here. They want custody." Tommy's blood went cold. "What? Why now?" "It's been 6 years since Beth was born. They never wanted anything to do with her before." Greta handed him the telegram. It was from a lawyer representing the Harrison family, Tommy's late wife's people. They were claiming that Tommy had abandoned his responsibilities as a father by entering into a marriage of convenience for financial gain. They argued that Beth deserved to be raised by proper family in a normal home environment. "This is because of me," Greta said, her voice breaking. "Because of our arrangement. They're using our marriage against you." "Against us," Tommy corrected firmly, "and they don't have a leg to stand on. Beth is healthy, happy, and loved. Any judge can see that." But Tommy's confidence was shaken when the Harrisons arrived a week later with their fancy lawyer. Catherine Harrison, Tommy's late mother-in-law, was a stern woman who'd never approved of her daughter marrying a poor cowboy. Next to her was her son, Robert, and his wife, a couple who lived in a fine house in Springfield with money from a manufacturing business. They came to the ranch unannounced, clearly hoping to catch Beth in some terrible condition. Instead, they found her in the garden with Greta, planting vegetables and laughing. Beth was rosy-cheeked, healthy, and obviously thriving. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line when she saw them. "Elizabeth," she called sharply. Beth looked up, confused. She didn't know these people. Tommy came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. "Mrs. Harrison, what are you doing here?" "I came to see my granddaughter." "The child you sold to this woman? For money?" "I didn't sell anyone," Tommy said, his voice hard. "And you need to leave my property." "Your property?" Robert Harrison laughed. "You mean your wife's property. Everyone knows you married her for her money. You couldn't take care of Elizabeth yourself, so you found a rich woman desperate enough to take you both on." Greta stood up, her full height impressive even from across the yard. "Mr. Harrison, you're on my land, insulting my husband and frightening my daughter. I'll ask you once politely to leave." "Your daughter?" Catherine sneered. "That child has real family. She shouldn't be raised by a circus freak and a gold digger." Beth started crying. She ran to Greta, who picked her up despite the girl being almost 6 now and bigger than most kids her age. "That's enough," Tommy said, his voice deadly quiet. "Get off my land now." "We'll see you in court," the lawyer said smoothly. "We have witnesses who will testify to the transactional nature of your marriage. We have evidence that you couldn't provide for the child. A judge will see that Elizabeth belongs with family who can give her a proper home." They left, but the damage was done. Beth was upset, asking why those mean people had called Mama Greta names. Tommy and Greta tried to explain in terms a child could understand. But how do you tell a 6-year-old that people want to take her away? The court date was set for 3 weeks later. In that time, Tommy and Greta had to find a lawyer, prepare their defense, and face the reality that they might lose Beth. The town was divided. Some folks supported Tommy and Greta, having seen firsthand how Beth had transformed from a dying child to a healthy, happy girl. Others whispered that maybe the Harrisons had a point. Maybe it wasn't right for a child to be raised in such an unnatural situation. The church ladies had a field day. "I always said that marriage was strange," one said loudly at the general store. "Poor child being raised by those two." But others pushed back. "That child was dying," said Mrs. Chen from the store. "Those people didn't care about her then. They just want her now because Tommy found a way to save her life." The night before the trial, Tommy couldn't sleep. He found Greta sitting in Beth's room watching the girl sleep. "I can't lose her," Greta whispered. "Tommy, she's my daughter. She calls me Mama. She's taught me what it means to be loved and needed. If they take her..." Tommy sat beside her, taking her hand. "They won't. We won't let them. But what if we don't have a choice? What if the judge agrees with them? What if our marriage being unconventional is enough to..." "Then we'll make it conventional," Tommy said suddenly. Greta looked at him. "What?" "We started this as a business arrangement. But that's not what we are anymore, Greta. You know it, and I know it. I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for months, probably. I just didn't want to say it and make things complicated. But if they're going to attack our marriage, then let's show them what it really is. A real marriage. A real family." Greta's eyes filled with tears. "Tommy, you don't have to say that just for the trial." "I'm not saying it for the trial. I'm saying it because it's true. I love you. I love how you are with Beth. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you hum when you cook and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love coming home to you every day. I love you." "Oh, Tommy," Greta's voice broke. "I love you too. I've been so scared to say it. Scared you'd think I was trying to change our agreement. But I've loved you for so long now." They kissed then. Really kissed. For the first time since their courthouse wedding. It was gentle and sweet and full of all the feelings they'd been holding back for months. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Tommy said, "we face it together. As a real married couple. As Beth's parents. As a family." "As a family," Greta agreed. The courtroom was packed the next day. The whole town had turned out, everyone wanting to see the outcome of the scandal. Tommy and Greta sat at one table with their lawyer, a sharp woman from the next county who'd handled custody cases before. The Harrisons sat at the other table with their expensive lawyer, looking confident and proper. The Harrison lawyer went first, painting a picture of Tommy as a desperate man who'd essentially sold himself and his daughter for money. He brought witnesses who testified to the rushed wedding, the business-like nature of the arrangement, the fact that Tommy and Greta had started with separate bedrooms. "This is not a real marriage, Your Honor," the lawyer argued. "This is a transaction. A wealthy, lonely woman bought herself a family, and a poor man sold his daughter's guardianship for medical care and financial security. The child deserves better than to be a commodity in a business deal." Catherine Harrison took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "My daughter died bringing that child into the world. It breaks my heart that Elizabeth is being raised in such circumstances. We can give her a proper home, with proper family values, with people who love her for the right reasons." "And why didn't you offer to take her when she was sick and dying?" their lawyer asked. "We didn't know how severe it was. Tommy never asked for our help. It was a lie, but a smooth one." Then it was their turn. Their lawyer called Dr. Chen to the stand first. "Doctor, you examined Beth Mercer in September of last year. What was her condition?" "Critical. The child was severely malnourished, her respiratory system was failing, and without immediate intervention I gave her less than 3 months to live." "And her condition now?" "She's thriving. Healthy weight, strong lungs, no sign of the complications that were killing her. It's remarkable. What changed?" "Everything. Proper nutrition, medication, clean environment, and most importantly, loving care from 2 devoted parents who followed every treatment protocol perfectly." The lawyer called several ranch hands who testified to seeing Tommy and Greta's relationship grow. The cook talked about the family dinners, the laughter, the obvious affection. Doc Harrison, the local doctor, spoke about how Beth had been hours from death multiple times before Tommy married Greta, and how he'd watched the family form into something real and beautiful. Then Greta took the stand. The Harrison lawyer went after her hard. "Mrs. Mercer, isn't it true that you proposed this marriage because you were lonely and wanted to buy companionship?" "I proposed the marriage because I saw a good man trying to save his daughter's life and I had the means to help. Yes, I was lonely. Yes, I wanted family. But I didn't buy anything. I offered a partnership. A partnership with separate bedrooms and a business-like arrangement. At first, yes, but relationships grow. We grew to care for each other. How convenient right before this trial." "It's not convenient. It's real." Greta's voice was strong. "I love my husband. I love my daughter. This isn't about money or convenience or loneliness anymore. It's about family. The family we built together. You're not her real mother. I'm the mother who sat up with her through fevers. I'm the mother who taught her to read and bake and be brave. I'm the mother she calls for when she's scared. I'm the mother who would die before I let anyone hurt her. Blood doesn't make family. Love does." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked moved. Then Tommy took the stand. The Harrison lawyer tried to paint him as a gold digger, but Tommy's honest, straightforward answers made it hard. "Did you marry Mrs. Vandenberg for her money?" "I married her to save my daughter's life." "That's not the same thing. Sounds the same to me." The Harrisons left town the next day, muttering about appeals and injustice, but their lawyer quietly advised them to drop it. No judge would overturn a decision when the child had spoken so clearly about where she wanted to be. Within a week, they sent a stiff letter formally withdrawing their custody claim. They never contacted Beth again. The town's reaction was mixed at first. Some folks had watched the trial and come away with their hearts changed. Others still whispered and judged. But Tommy and Greta had stopped caring what people thought. They had their family, legally recognized and emotionally secure. That was enough. The night after the trial, once Beth was asleep, Tommy and Greta sat on their porch under the stars. They sat close, her hand in his, comfortable in a way that felt earned. "I meant what I said in Beth's room," Tommy said quietly. "I love you, Greta. This isn't just about keeping Beth anymore. I want to be your husband in every way." Greta turned to look at him, moonlight catching in her eyes. "Are you sure?" "Tommy, I'm not like other women. I'm not small or delicate. I can't give you." "Stop." Tommy touched her face gently. "You're not like other women. You're better. You're strong and capable and kind. You saved my daughter's life and taught me how to hope again. You're exactly what I want." "I love you," Greta whispered. "I've been so scared to want this. Scared to hope that you could really care for someone like me. Someone like you is exactly who I care for. The real you, not some imaginary different version." They kissed again, deeper this time, full of promise and commitment. When they went inside that night, Tommy didn't go to his separate bedroom. They'd started as strangers in separate rooms, but that night they truly became husband and wife. The years that followed were the best of their lives. Beth continued to grow stronger and healthier. By the time she was 10, no one would have believed she'd once been a sickly child on death's door. She was tall for her age, sturdy and strong, with her mother's gentle nature and Greta's fearless spirit. She idolized Greta, following her around the ranch, learning everything she could. Greta taught her to rope cattle, manage accounts, negotiate with buyers, and stand up for herself. From Tommy, Beth learned compassion, patience, and the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to prove itself. The ranch prospered under Tommy and Greta's joint management. Tommy's practical skills and Greta's business sense made them an unbeatable team. They expanded the property, improved the herd, and became one of the most successful operations in 3 counties. But more than business success, they built a real marriage. They had their disagreements, of course. Greta could be stubborn, and Tommy had a streak of pride that occasionally caused friction. But they'd learned to talk things through, to compromise, to remember that they were partners in everything. They moved into the same bedroom permanently, combining their lives in all the ways they'd initially held separate. Greta's bedroom became a study. Tommy's became a guest room. Their shared room became a sanctuary, a place where the giant woman and the cowboy could just be themselves together. The town eventually came around. It's hard to maintain gossip when the subjects of that gossip are clearly happy and successful. Gradually, Tommy and Greta became just another married couple, unusual maybe, but respected. The church ladies who'd once whispered about Greta started inviting her to social events. Greta politely declined most of them, remembering their earlier cruelty, but she made a few genuine friends among the women who defended her during the trial. Tommy became known as one of the fairest bosses in the territory, and men who'd once made jokes about his marriage started asking his advice on ranch management. He never forgot who'd stood by them and who hadn't, but he didn't hold grudges. Life was too short for that. When Beth turned 12, she asked if she could take Greta's last name along with Tommy's. "I want to be Beth Mercer Vandenberg," she explained. "Because you're both my parents and I want both your names." They made it legal at the courthouse, the same place where they'd fought for their family. The judge who'd ruled in their favor smiled when he saw them. "This family just keeps getting stronger," he said. Beth grew into a remarkable young woman. She had Tommy's kind heart and Greta's fierce determination. She was tall, nearly 6 feet by the time she was 16, and she wore her height with confidence because Greta had taught her that being different was a strength, not a weakness. Young men started coming around, and Tommy found himself in the strange position of trying to intimidate suitors, while having a wife who could intimidate them much more effectively just by standing up. They'd laugh about it together, watching from the porch as some nervous boy showed up with flowers. "Should I go tell him Beth's not interested?" Greta would ask with a smile. "Nah, let her handle it." She learned from the best how to shut down someone gently but firmly, and Beth did handle it, with grace and confidence. She dated a few boys, but she was in no rush. "I want what you and Mama Greta have," she told Tommy once. "A real partnership. Someone who sees me for who I really am and loves that person." "That's wise," Tommy said. "Take your time. The right person will come along when you're ready." As Beth prepared to go away to school to study veterinary medicine, Tommy and Greta faced being empty nesters. The house would be quiet without Beth's energy filling it. The night before Beth left, they had a special dinner together. Just the 3 of them. The family they'd built from an impossible situation. "I've been thinking about something," Beth said. "About how we all came together. Papa, you needed help saving me. Mama Greta, you needed family. But you know what? I think you needed each other too. You were both so lonely in different ways, and you found each other. You saved each other just as much as you saved me." Tommy and Greta looked at each other across the table, seeing in each other's eyes the truth of Beth's words. "You're right," Greta said softly. "We did save each other. I used to think I married your Mama Greta out of desperation," Tommy added. "But looking back, I think maybe it was fate. Maybe we were meant to find each other exactly when and how we did." "I don't believe in fate," Greta said. "I believe we made choices. Good choices. Brave choices. And we built something beautiful from those choices." "Either way," Beth said, raising her glass of water, "here's to our family, the family we chose." They clinked glasses, smiling at each other, this unlikely family that had faced down gossip, legal challenges, and their own fears to build something lasting. After Beth left for school, Tommy and Greta adjusted to their new rhythm. The house was quieter, but it wasn't lonely. They had each other, after all. They'd take evening rides together, work side by side during the day, and spend their nights talking about everything and nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" Tommy asked one night as they sat on their porch, a ritual they'd maintained for years. "Taking a chance on a desperate cowboy with nothing to offer but problems?" Greta laughed, that deep, warm laugh that Tommy loved. "You had plenty to offer. Honor, love, determination. That little girl who needed saving. You gave me a family, Tommy. You gave me a purpose beyond just making money. You gave me love when I thought I'd never have it again. How could I possibly regret that?" "I think I got the better end of the deal," Tommy said. "A beautiful, brilliant wife. A daughter who's alive and thriving. Success beyond my wildest dreams. We both got exactly what we needed, Greta said, taking his hand. That's what makes it perfect. Years passed. Beth graduated top of her class and came back to open a veterinary practice in town. She eventually fell in love with a kind young man who thought her height and strength were wonderful, rather than strange. Tommy walked her down the aisle with Greta on his other arm, both parents giving their daughter away together. They became grandparents, which delighted them both. Beth's children grew up hearing the story of how their grandparents met, how a business arrangement became the greatest love story of their lives. Tommy and Greta grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. The cowboy who'd been desperate enough to accept an unconventional proposal, and the widow who'd been brave enough to offer it, had built a life that exceeded anything either had imagined possible. On their 30th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows. This time it wasn't in a courthouse with strangers watching. It was on their ranch, surrounded by family and friends, with Beth and her children present, with ranch hands who'd become like family, with townspeople who'd learned that love comes in many forms. Do you, Tommy Mercer, take this woman to be your wife, to love and cherish for all your remaining days? I do, again and always. And do you, Greta Mercer, take this man to be your husband, to love and cherish for all your remaining days? I do, again and forever. This time, when the minister said they could kiss, they did so without hesitation, without awkwardness, with the comfort and passion of a couple who'd built a real marriage from unconventional beginnings. As they stood together, afterward watching the sunset paint the sky gold and pink, Tommy thought back to that desperate day when he'd collapsed in town, certain he'd lost everything. He'd been so wrong. That was the day he'd found everything. What are you thinking about? Greta asked, leaning down slightly to rest her head on his. About how I need a husband, you need a strong daughter, Tommy said, echoing that first conversation.